I guess you could say I embarrassed myself. Or maybe I embarrassed him. Honestly, at the time, I didn't think it was like that big of a deal. My name's Lauren. I'm 29. And I didn't realize just how much my husband, Jake, had been holding in until, well, you'll see. Okay, so a little background first. Jake's 33 and works as an architect. He's one of those quiet types, you know? The kind of guy you'd probably forget was even in the room if you weren't looking right at him. Some people might call him boring, but I always thought he was just dependable. Like, yeah, he's not the life of the party, but he's the type who'll drop everything to help his dad fix a fence or, like, rewire his buddy's garage. What's not to love, right? And then there's me. I wouldn't call myself a social butterfly or anything, but I like meeting new people, telling stories, making people laugh. Jake always says I'm a lot, but, like, not in a bad way. Or at least I think he doesn't mean it in a bad way. His friends like me, and that's what matters. So a couple weeks ago, Jake's friends, guys he's known since forever, invited him out for one of their, like, dudes-only nights. Apparently it's a once-a-month thing, but this time they, specifically told him to bring me along. Weird, right? I mean, usually I'm not part of the whole man cave vibe, but I thought, hey, maybe they're tired of talking about sports and beer and, like, actually want to have some fun. Jake wasn't exactly thrilled about it. He was like, if you want to come, come. So, I did. Picture this, we walk into this dive bar, not exactly my scene, but whatever, cheap beer, sticky floors, sports crap all over the walls. You know the type. Jake's friends were already like a few beers in when we got there, and they're all like, Lauren! Finally, we get to meet the girl Jake's been hiding. I laughed because, like, what else are you supposed to do? Jake kind of smiled, but you could tell he was like already wishing I'd stayed home. And I get it, it was his thing. But hey, if they wanted me there, I figured I might as well make the most of it. Here's where, it all went sideways. We're sitting around this sticky table, and his friend Matt starts cracking jokes about Jake's job. Stuff like, oh, Mr. Architect, can you design me a doghouse? It was harmless, you know? But Jake's, kinda sensitive about his work. He takes it really seriously, and, like, I get it. But sometimes I feel like he could lighten up a little. So when Matt asks me, what's it like being married to him? I don't know why, but I just, went for it. I was like, oh, Jake? He's great when he's not, working late to make sure, like, the angles on a roof are perfect. Everyone laughed. Except Jake. I thought, come on, it's just a joke, lighten up. But, yeah, it kinda spiraled from there. So, after that, I guess I, got a little carried away. I wasn't trying to be mean, I swear. But, like, once I've had a couple drinks, my filter kind of, disappears. I started telling them how Jake keeps this, like, crazy detailed spreadsheet of every single thing we spend money on, like we're, living in 2008 and the economy's about to crash. And then I joked about how he, checks gas prices at 3 different stations before filling up as if saving 15 cents is, like, gonna change our lives. Oh, and I might have mentioned that he once tried to convince me to cancel my yoga membership because, stretching is free. His friends were dying laughing. I mean, like, tears in their eyes. And for a second, I felt like, the star of the show. But Jake? He just sat there, sipping his beer, his face getting redder and redder. He didn't say anything, though, so I figured, you know, he was fine. If he had a problem, he'd, like, tell me, right? Anyway, by the time we got home, I was feeling pretty good about the night. I thought I'd made, like, a great impression, you know? His friends had fun, they liked me, and, maybe I even loosened Jake up a little. But as soon as the door closed, he turned to me and went, "What the hell was that?" And, I froze. Jake never talks to me like that. I mean, yeah, we've argued before, but he's not the type to yell or even, like, raise his voice. So when he just stood there, staring at me like I'd, done something awful, I didn't know what to say. "What are you talking about?" I asked. He just shook his head and said, "You don't get it, do you?" Then he went to bed. And that was it. No explanation, no fight, nothing. I sat there for like hours, replaying the whole night in my head, trying to figure out what I did that was so, terrible. And honestly, I still didn't get it. Yeah, okay, maybe I embarrassed him a little, but it's not like I lied about anything. He is practical to a fault. He does obsess over money. And yeah, maybe I shouldn't have aired all that in front of his friends, but they were laughing. They had fun. Isn't that the point? I thought about apologizing the next morning, but then I was like, for what? Telling the truth? So, I didn't. And Jake didn't bring it up again, so I figured, it would just blow over. But, it didn't. The next few days were weird. Jake barely talked to me, and when he did, it was all like surface-level stuff, bills, groceries, that kind of thing. No jokes, no. How was your day? Nothing. Told myself he was just, sulking. He'd get over it. I mean, he always did, right? Jake wasn't the kind of guy to hold a grudge. But then, little things started adding up. He'd come home later than usual, saying he had meetings or deadlines or whatever. And yeah, his job can get crazy sometimes, but now it felt like, I don't know, like he was avoiding me. At dinner, I'd try to make conversation, and he'd just nod or give me one-word answers. Yeah, sure. Even when I asked about his friends, he'd shrug and go, they're fine. It was driving me crazy. Then, about a week after that night, I got a text from Matt. He was like, hey, Lauren, you coming to the next guy's night? We need more of your jokes about Jake, with a winking emoji. I laughed when I saw it. I mean, if Matt was inviting me, then, maybe Jake wasn't as mad as I thought, right? So that evening, when Jake got home, I brought it up. Hey, I said, Matt texted me. He wants me to come to the next guy's night. Jake didn't even look up from his plate. Yeah, I'm sure he does, he said. There was this edge to his voice that made me pause. What's that supposed to mean? I asked. And then he set his fork down, looked me right in the eye, and went, it means you turned my friends into your audience last time. Why wouldn't they want you back? You made them laugh at my expense. I blinked, totally stunned. I wasn't making fun of you, I said. I was just joking around. Really? He shot back, his voice getting louder. Because it felt a whole lot like you were tearing me down just to make yourself look good. Do you even realize how embarrassing that was for me? My chest, tightened. I didn't mean to embarrass you, I said, my voice shaking. I thought we were all having fun. Yeah, well, maybe next time you can find a way to have fun that doesn't involve making me look like an idiot. Oof. That hit hard. Jake wasn't a yeller, but the way he said that, it was sharp enough to cut right through me. I tried to defend myself. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, but, you're blowing this way out of proportion. It wasn't that serious. He just shook his head, got up, and carried his plate to the sink. You don't get it, Lauren, he said, his voice low now. You never do. And then he walked out of the kitchen. That's It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them. He'd already given up on me ever, understanding. And maybe he was right. Jake had always been the calm, steady one in our relationship. The one who kept things grounded while I, kind of did my own thing. I wasn't used to seeing him like this, hurt, angry, distant. I wanted to fix it, but I, didn't know how. Apologizing felt pointless because, honestly, I didn't think I'd done anything that bad. So I did what I always do when I feel stuck. I distracted myself. I spent the next few days shopping, meeting up with friends for lunch, and scrolling through Instagram like it was my full-time job. Packages started piling up at the door, and while Jake didn't say anything about it, I could feel his disapproval every time he walked past them. Then one night, he dropped the bomb. I was sitting on the couch, half watching some reality show, when he came into the living room and said, I think we need to talk. Ugh. Those words are never good. About what? I asked, trying to sound casual, even though my stomach was already in knots. He sat down across from me, his expression serious. About us. I laughed nervously. What about us? He sighed and said, I feel like we're on different pages. And honestly, I don't know if we've ever been on the same one. That completely threw me. What are you talking about? We've been together for years. Yeah, he said, his voice calm but firm. And in all that time, I've always been the one trying to keep everything together. I've been the responsible one, the one who makes sure things don't fall apart while you just do whatever you want. I bristled. That's not fair, I snapped. I contribute too. Do you? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like I'm the one keeping us afloat while you spend money we don't have and make jokes at my expense to impress my friends. That's not true, I said, my voice shaking. I work hard, Jake. I keep this house running. He laughed, but it wasn't like a nice laugh. You keep it running, he said, his voice rising. Lauren, half the time I'm the one cleaning up your messes, literally and figuratively. And the other half? I'm too busy working to even notice what disaster you've left behind. I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. So what? You think I'm some kind of, burden? He didn't answer right away. And the silence was deafening. Finally, he said, I think you don't take anything seriously. Not me, not our marriage, not our future. And I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending that doesn't bother me. That broke me. So what are you saying? I whispered. That you want to leave? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, Lauren. But I can't keep living like this. Something has to change. I wanted to scream, to tell him he was being ridiculous, but deep down I knew he wasn't. Jake had always been the rock in our relationship, and I'd leaned on him so much that I'd never stopped to think about how it might feel for him. But instead of owning up to that, I did what I always do, I deflected. So this is all my fault? You're perfect, and I'm the one ruining everything? Jake shook his head, looking more exhausted than angry now. It's not about blame, Lauren, he said quietly. It's about whether we can actually build a life together, or if we're just too different. And for once, I didn't have anything to say. That night, Jake slept on the couch. The next morning, he left for work without saying goodbye. I spent the day wandering around the house, replaying everything he said over and over in my head. Part of me was angry at him for being so harsh and, at myself for letting it get this far. But another part of me was scared. What if he was serious? What if I'd actually pushed him too far this time? I wish I could say that was like the moment I had some grand epiphany that I realized how selfish I'd been and vowed to change. But, the truth is, I still didn't see myself as the problem. I told myself Jake was just being dramatic, blowing everything out of proportion. He'd cool off eventually like he always did. Except this time he didn't. Over the next few weeks, he started pulling away more and more. He stopped texting me during the day, stopped asking how my day was when he got home. He started going out with his friends again, but, without inviting me. And the worst part? I had no idea how to fix it. Then, one night, I overheard him on the phone. He was in the kitchen, talking to someone in that low, serious tone he uses when he doesn't want me to hear. I couldn't make out everything he said, but one phrase, stuck out. I don't think she'll ever change. Felt like a punch to the gut. Was he talking about me? Was he telling his friends he was done with me? Or, worse, was he talking to someone else? I didn't sleep that night. My mind was racing with worst-case scenarios, and by the time Jake came to bed, I couldn't take it anymore. Who were you talking to? I blurted out. He looked at me, startled. What? On the phone, I said, sitting up. Who were you talking to? He sighed, rubbing his temples. It was Matt, he said. I frowned. Why? Because I needed someone to talk to, he said, his voice heavy. And I can't talk to you. That hurt more than anything else he'd said. Why not? Because you don't listen, Lauren, he said, his voice cracking. You never have. And just like that, the wall between us felt insurmountable. That night, Jake's words echoed in my head long after he fell asleep. You don't listen. It wasn't the first time he'd said something like that, but this time it felt different. There was this finality in his tone, like he'd already made up his mind about where this was heading. In the days that followed, things only got worse. Jake started spending more time at work. He'd come home later and later, saying he had meetings or deadlines. And when he was home, he barely spoke to me unless it was about something, practical, bills, groceries, stuff like that. I tried to act like everything was fine. Posted pictures of us on Instagram, sent him funny memes during the day, but, nothing seemed to get through to him. Then, one evening, he came home and asked me to sit down. The look on his face made my stomach drop. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound casual even though my hands were, shaking. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, his voice calm but steady. "And I think we need to take a break." I froze. "A break?" I repeated, my voice shaky. "What does that even mean?" "It means I need some space," he said, looking me right in the eye. "I need to figure out if this is what I want, if we're what I want." My chest tightened and I felt tears welling up, but I forced them back. "So what? You're just giving up on us." "I'm not giving up," he said, his voice firm. "But I can't keep doing this, Lauren. I can't keep feeling like I'm the only one trying." I wanted to fight back, to argue that he was being unfair, but deep down, I knew he wasn't. "You think I'm not trying?" I snapped, my voice breaking. "Do you have any idea how much I do for you, for us?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not saying you don't contribute," he said, his tone softer now. "But it feels like we're always working against each other, not with each other. And I'm exhausted." I opened my mouth to argue, but the look on his face stopped me. He wasn't just angry, he was hurt. And I hated myself for being the reason why. "I'll stay at Matt's for a while," he said, standing up. "We can talk again when we've both had some time to think." And just like that, he was gone. The next few weeks were, a blur. First, I told myself he just needed to blow off some steam, that he'd come back in a few days and things would go back to normal. But as the days turned into weeks, I started to realize this wasn't just a temporary thing. Jake was serious about needing space. And for the first time, I started to wonder if he might not come back at all. I tried reaching out, texting him, leaving voicemails. But his responses were short, distant. I even showed up at Matt's place once, but Jake refused to see me. It was like he was cutting me out of his life. And, the worst part? I couldn't even blame him. As much as I wanted to paint myself as the victim, I couldn't ignore the role I'd played in pushing him away. Eventually, Jake agreed to meet up and talk. He picked this quiet little cafe, like a neutral spot where we could have a serious conversation without, distractions. When I saw him walk in, my heart ached. He looked tired, but there was this calmness about him, like he'd already made peace with whatever he was about to say. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began once we were seated. "And I think it's time for us to go our separate ways." The words hit me like a freight train, but I forced myself to stay composed. "You're sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "I love you, Lauren. I always will. But I don't think we bring out the best in each other. And I think we both deserve more than that." I wanted to argue, to beg him to give us another chance, but deep down I knew he was right. Our marriage had become this constant cycle of misunderstandings, hurt feelings, and, unspoken resentment. And while I didn't want to lose him, I couldn't deny that we'd reached a breaking point. In the end, we agreed to a clean break. Jake moved out and got his own place, and I stayed in the house. We split our assets fairly, and despite the pain, there was this strange sense of relief. Looking back now, I can see where I went wrong. I let my impulsiveness and, my need for attention overshadow the things that really mattered. I didn't take Jake's feelings seriously until it was too late. I wish I could say I've changed, that I've learned my lesson, but the truth is, I'm still figuring it out. All I know is I lost a good man, and I only have myself to blame.